You're listening to Through Our Lens with the Disabled and Nondisabled Alliance at Sacramento State, a club, organization, whatever, for disabled students, staff, and their allies to discuss and educate each other about disability-related topics, advocate on behalf of disabled students and the community, and to hang out together and just be a community.
So we want to be more recognizable to Sac State. So please join the conversation by following and messaging us on Instagram at Dana@SacState. It's DANA@SacState. Hi everyone, welcome to the 5th episode of Through Our Lens with the Disabled and Nondisabled Alliance, where we have a conversation on disability. My name is Brian Tao, and I am one of the officers and the host of this podcast. Our topic today is going to be about physical and occupational therapy. Last week, we had our second club meeting, where we had Dr. Eric Lubis join the conversation. We went over the benefits of recreational therapy and heard stories of his time at Shriners Hospital for Children at Portland, Oregon, where he was the program director of the recreational therapy unit. You can watch the recording on YouTube if you missed it. And actually, at the time of this recording, it didn't actually happen yet. We're like 1 hour before 6:30. It's 5:18. All right. But
the non-linear nature of time.
Yeah, I guess you're a little confusing. But our topic today is gonna be really similar. It's gonna be like a different kind of therapy. It'll be about physical and occupational therapy and kind of like our feelings and personal experiences with it. As always, it's gonna be a very free-form format, so expect a conversation with many tangents, just like how a real conversation would go. And also, we didn't really plan that much, but yeah. And finally, as always, I'm here with the president and founder, William and Rian.
Hello.
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 Yeah, to kind of get us started, I wanted to ask what kind of the definition of physical therapy and occupational therapy. And I guess I could like try to explain it. So both therapies are like types of rehab care. So they look to help you improve yourself physically, mentally. And like the main difference is that physical therapy is more about gross motor skills. So learning how to jump, learning how to run, learning how to, move your body around, exercise. But occupational therapy is more fine motor skills, like feeding yourself, how to write better, how to open doors if you need to. And like Rian, did I miss anything? Didn't want to add anything?
Yeah, for me, physical therapy focused more on my overall body movements, like moving my legs around, being able to roll, moving my arms around. It was more about the muscle function itself rather than what the muscle function was used for. And my occupational therapy was about fine-tuning that muscle function I gained in physical therapy in order to complete specific tasks. Like, one of the things I struggled with was handwriting and moving my arms to reach for things. And so we focused on different ways we could make that easier for me, not just with moving my muscles themselves, but also looking into adaptive technology and tools that could help me accomplish those tasks, like kinesio tape, which is similar to sports tape that helps support my muscles, or using different shaped pens and pencils that had more grip support, stuff like that.
That's really
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, I guess that's
yeah. Sorry. That's enlightening for me. Like contra the view that maybe like physical therapy and occupational therapy just focus on the body. There's that's not the case. Like adaptive technology enters into the consideration, or at least it can. Can I ask a question real quick? Would you say that it's like that occupational therapy is like a misnomer of it, since it doesn't particularly have to do, it may have to do with like job relevant skills, but it isn't to do with like the job you happen to have? Because that was my assumption going in.
I mean, it's more about the skills and tasks that you want to complete in your daily life. It doesn't have to be centered around your job or a future job or a target job, but it can be if you want it to be one of your goals when working with your therapist. for me, a lot of the stuff we focused on was tasks related to daily living, like moving around the house and moving my stuff and using my stuff. But also, we focused a little bit on tools and techniques I could use for getting through school easier in the physical sense.
Yeah, yeah, I guess like similar to me, like I use like adapted care like at some points but life, but I don't use it anymore. But like they kind of showed me like different kind of spoons that might be easier for to feed myself because I can't lift up my arm like towards my face. Yeah, I think that's really helpful, the adapted care.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I have one more comment, and then
Yeah.
I'll shut up for a little bit. The if I ever have like, I don't know, a gym to name, if I ever like own a property and I want to fill it with sports equipment, it's going to be called gross physical movement.
So it sounds really
Okay,
cool.
I have a running list of good band names, but I'm gonna have to have a new one for new good gym names.
Yeah, it's really funny. Okay, so speaking about occupational therapy or physical therapy, so William, can you explain like why you didn't essentially you broke your leg, but you didn't like choose to think about physical or occupational therapy?
Yeah, that so yeah, I for those I mean nobody would know, but like for those who may were like not my family and friends, I guess, or otherwise people have like I've definitely told about this kind of thing. I did over the summer of like 2020 break my talus, or 2021 break my talus, which is sort of the critical hinge bone in your ankle. It was the left one. I climbed a tree. I fell out of it, being an idiot, and it was bad. It was really hard on my partner at the time. So like had to have this harrowing experience of transporting me to the hospital. Anyway, what turned out to be the case was that my like health insurance wouldn't was very difficult to manage. I have it nominally speaking through my parents' occupations, but I it turned out to be very bureaucratically interesting because it has to be bureaucratically interesting because the health insurance company has to maximize profits somehow. So they work with things like they deal in things like networks and whatnots, and having to navigate that bureaucracy proved very difficult, very time consuming. And basically by the time I had seen a doctor, the splint that they placed around my ankle at the emergency room had, mostly become useless. And I wasn't, I was able to get like x-rays and stuff, but not proper like treatment for an injured ankle. By the time I had really consulted with a surgeon on the ankle, and gotten some advice, and I had purchased for myself, like with my own money, a boot to replace a like walking boot to replace the splint and stuff. By the time I got the call for like a better imaging a better imaging procedure than the X-rays they had administered up to that point, so that the surgeon could get a better idea of what the talus looked like at that time, which I believe what was ordered was an MRI. By the time I received that call, the bureaucracy had been so slow that my ankle was like fully functional. As far as I can tell, it's not getting worse. I had given up on receiving that call and further care by that time because it wasn't worth it. The injury wasn't bad enough for me to keep jumping through these hoops. And best believe that informs my opinion of politics going forward. But yeah, I never got to the point where physical therapy was something that seemed that entered like consideration even because as far as I know, like my ankle is still kind of messed up. So the thing I don't know, does it count if I do things like take walks, like I make sure to use it and like rotate the ankle, just to stretch out the various muscles. And does that count as physical therapy, like self-administered? Is that a bad attitude to take towards this kind of subject?
I mean,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
guess.
technically, yes. What we were planning on talking about, I think, was more official type of stuff with like
Yeah,
an
definitely. We
actual
should.
licensed therapist to guide you through it. But I mean, taking care of yourself on your own doesn't mean it's not physical therapy in general. It's generally better when there's a little more guidance so you know what you're doing and you don't accidentally re-injure yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Don't take me as an example. There's every reasonable chance that my ankle's gonna get so arthritic in like later adulthood that I'll be walking around with a cane and no reason to be,
Okay.
So the reason why I kind of asked about like William's experiences with like PT, because he doesn't really have that much experience. So I just kind of want to get that out of the way. So
I'm sorry, that sounds horrible.
No, that's the
I
correct
know.
phrasing.
I know it sounds horrible.
Get this idiot over and done with. We can move on. It's the important stuff. What about okay, so Brian killed Rian. Brian, what's your experience with physical and/or occupational therapy? I think I'm getting the impression that Rian's is somewhat more extensive than either.
Yeah,
so
honestly,
it might be worthwhile to go through those two first.
Yeah, honestly, I wasn't being serious, by the way, about that.
I know, it's cool.
But anyways, my own experience, I don't really like remember much of it because I know that I started doing it when I was like in first grade, but like I kind of stopped before high school because for me, it kind of got like into the way of like my own class schedule because I wouldn't because sometimes like for PT and OT, which is physical therapy and occupational therapy, you do it like during your class time sometimes because that kind of helps more. I remember in like elementary school that I would like miss 2 hours of like class just to go to a different facility for my own therapy sessions, not really outside of class. But I kind of stopped before high school. Yeah, just like I said, I kind of got into the way of everything and it didn't really work like for me personally. But I know that I think it did help. I just don't really remember much about it.
Yeah. For me, it's still ongoing. I'm still doing physical therapy. I stopped my occupational therapy when I aged out of the CCS system. Brian, could you explain the acronym because I forgot what it stands for?
Oh wow. Yeah, sure. So it stands for California Children's Services, where essentially they kind of provide like other things like therapy sessions and what else again? I forgot.
Therapy sessions, and they also helped me with obtaining my wheelchair and doing the evaluations for that. They're really good at connecting you to other resources for managing your disability, and even if they aren't directly involved with or covering those resources, they're still really great at networking and pointing you in the right direction.
Yeah, you're right. So like for me, like I didn't have like therapy sessions at all, but I was like in consultation with CCS, and they did help me with to get like the equipment that I need, like a Hoyer lift, a power chair, a shower chair. They really helped with that.
Yeah, they helped us with all that too, and they also covered my therapy sessions at one of their facilities. I had physical therapy and occupational therapy for, oh man, I don't even remember when I started. Definitely since kindergarten, I think I distinctly remember trying to climb those physical therapy stairs up and down for like the first few years of elementary. And they also took care of my braces. I call them my braces. There's a more technical term for them within the field, but I call them my braces, aka my boots. They're actually next to me. I can't reach them. I haven't worn them for years, but they basically help keep your joints and body parts in place while you're doing the activity you want to be doing to make sure you don't mess up the muscles or joints as you're doing that activity. Because what my feet would do when I used to walk and run and stuff is they would point outward and all the pressure would go on that little ball knobby
Mhm.
part of your ankle, which is really bad.
Yeah.
So I ended up being set up with braces as I grew up to make sure that my feet weren't becoming all twisted as I grew. But they're not the most comfortable things in the world. They
They're
really
not.
aren't.
Yeah.
And when I was still walking, they wanted to preserve the flexibility of my ankle while still wearing it. So what they did is they got me one that went up a bit higher, like more towards my knee, and they had this hinge where my ankle was so that I could move my foot up and down, but it would still be straight.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is the back of that hinge where, the foot goes up and down, is made of hard plastic.
Yeah.
And when I fell, which was frequent, I would fall on my heels, which meant that I had bruises on my butt for like a year or so in elementary, simply because these goddamn plastic torture devices were pinching me every time I fell. Obviously we switched from that after a while, but it's a tool, but it doesn't necessarily work for everyone. And I think that's something that's really important to consider if you are in physical or occupational therapy right now or considering going into it, is that from both the patient and therapist perspective, is that not every solution will work for everyone, and it's okay to try a solution and then abandon it if it's not working. It's not your fault if it's not working. It just doesn't work for you, and that's fine. But I had a lot of trouble as a kid growing up, kind of grappling with the psychological effects of being in physical therapy
Yeah.
for like my whole life, because I knew from the start that I was disabled. I was told I had sleepy muscles when I was too young to understand what a muscle disease was. But I was chill with it, and I accepted the therapy pretty easily because they were like, "Go do this thing. That looks like fun, doesn't it?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do that thing. That looks like fun." But the more I did it, the more I kind of tuned into what the purpose of it all was. Like, I think I kind of started realizing the purpose of it in like halfway through elementary, where I realized, like, I made that connection between my muscles getting weaker and doing therapy, and I was like, wait, that's not extra playtime. That's exercise. Oh no.
That's real stuff. Yeah. Yeah, for me, like, yeah, for me, like, yeah, I didn't really think about like what like the therapy like kind of helped me with. It's like I was kind of like too young to understand. And talking with the braces, I do really understand that. I know,
Yeah.
like, I'm supposed to wear them. I was supposed to wear them like in elementary school, but it's like, nah, it's not really comfortable. I don't want to. And I could have wore them like at night, but that's even more comfortable. Like 7 hours of
Yeah.
braces, not really the best. But
we
like,
tried doing that 24-hour braces thing at the start, and I remember we got the special shoehorn to help get my shoes on and off with them. But honestly, it was not working, and I kind of stopped wearing them in high school because it was a lot of trouble to put on and take off. And now I don't really wear them at all unless I feel like they would help, which is a huge improvement, because you go from thinking I have to wear this because that's people told me to these are what these items are for, and I can wear them if I feel like I need to, right? It takes a whole lot of pressure off. But the problem is that I didn't have that nuance embedded in my young child brain when I started making the connections of what the physical therapy was for.
Yeah.
And so when they kept telling me, you got to do your exercises to keep your strength, you got to preserve your strength. And, they were getting increasingly distressed about it because I was losing strength, and they were trying to slow that as much as possible, which is fine. I also want to preserve my strength, but it was a lot of pressure, I think. And I think a lot of parents and therapists kind of forget how much pressure that is for a
It
young
is.
mind to be constantly told, you need to do this for your health, you need to do this or you're going to get weaker, you need to do this, you need to do this. And they don't mean anything horrible by it. They're not trying to psych the kid out, but they are trying to get the kid to take it seriously. But it kind of backfires from what I've noticed
Yeah, it
in both
does.
myself and other people who've gone through the same thing, is because then that kid internalizes the pressure and starts thinking, I'm a failure whenever they continue to lose strength. And we don't want any client or patient to think that, because it's really counterproductive and it's
Yeah.
really demoralizing, and it can very easily send them into a dark place mentally, which gets in the way of many other things besides keeping up with their physical therapy exercises.
Yeah. That's
And
like
I'm speaking from experience here. So
me too. Yeah. Yeah. So I have something to say for like yeah, for like that's one of the reasons why I kind of stopped. It just didn't really help me. My disease is mostly related to, so as I kind of get older, I'm just gonna get weaker and weaker. And like in high school, it was like I'm already weak, so like I don't really want to go to these meetings, to these therapy sessions, even though they may help, but they're probably not gonna help because I'm gonna get weaker. I'm gonna lose more motor skills and stuff.
yeah, I managed to stick with it, and I'm glad I did, because now it's more um something that I actively choose to do, not
Mm-hmm.
because I want to counter my disability like it kind of originally was meant for, but just because I want to take care of my body. I
Yeah.
do need exercise, and I equate going to PT to going to the gym. It's not something I do because I have to. It's something I do because I want to, and it's good for
Mm-hmm.
me, and I'm not obligated to go. And not feeling the obligation makes it a lot easier to fulfill that obligation. So, and nowadays I'm focusing more on pain relief. Like, I get a lot of soreness and pain, especially in my joints, because my muscles aren't really doing a great job keeping them stable.
Yeah.
So I focus on exercises that stabilize my joints and help relieve pain. Um, I've got a few stretches in my arsenal now for
Mm-hmm.
neck pain relief that I got from my current therapist, who is with Kaiser and not
Cool.
CCS, because I aged out of CCS a couple years ago. Um, but it took time to get there, and that evolution of my frame of mind about PT did take a long time to form. And I feel like I could have skipped a lot of steps there if there was less pressure on me doing this to kind of fix me or
Yeah.
prevent me from becoming more broken, and more on, this is a good thing to do, it's a good habit to get into, it's good for your health, and you can do it if you want to. You don't have to do it, but wouldn't it be great if you had these tools in your toolbox so that when it does become an issue, then you know what to do, stuff like that. Um, but I think there were several factors
Yeah.
that kind of brought me to where I am now and out of that original high pressure mindset. One was getting into power soccer. You guys might have heard this talked about in the meeting, because it does fall under the category of recreational therapy. For me, it's more of a hobby. I didn't get into it because of a therapist. I got into it because I thought it looked fun. Um, but it helped a lot because it helped me realize that my disability wasn't a necessarily bad thing. It wasn't a reflection of who I am in terms of like morality and responsibility. Like, I'm not a bad person for not being on top of my physical therapy exercises that
Mm-hmm.
are supposed to help my disability, right? You know, it's okay to be disabled. Um, and it also was a nice place to be surrounded by other people like you and in an encouraging and positive environment where you work together as a team, you know. So that was one factor. But the point being that the more I accepted my disability for what it was and the less I pushed back against it, the more willing I became to work with my physical therapist to do my exercises, because it didn't become a matter of, you know, fighting back against an unmovable force. It became working with an unmovable force. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm working with my disability to do the things I want to do. I'm working with my body to do the things I want to do, not working against my body to do the things I want to do. And I feel like that's a very nuanced difference that isn't emphasized enough in the field. And I feel like a lot of people suffer for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely do agree like with what you're saying. Like I think therapy, like physical therapy, occupational therapy, should be something that you're kind of like choose to do it or not. It shouldn't be like forced like in the beginning. Um uh yeah, so William, do you have anything to add?
Yes, to all I it's me, right? I have all the things. So there are a couple of points that I think I want to bring in to physical therapy specifically, and rather physical and occupational therapy. I suspect similar problems will pervade in both areas, because it may be the same, literally the same people doing it anyway. The one of them is just that what I'm noticing from both sets of stories here is that there seems to be a lack of cognizance building and amongst people doing administering physical therapy and occupational therapy to like children. And what I mean by that is, you know, it kind of is obvious that you can't reasonably be expected to be like a perfect pedagogue and a physical and occupational therapist at the same time. There's only so much training a person can do
Mhm.
in preparing for any career. But in the same moment, it's it's fairly clear that like the attitudes that were you know presented to you and attempted to be ingrained in you going through physical therapy as kids was not like the correct one, not at all. That there were better ways to make you aware of your disability. I suspect that this will be a common theme, that people who have had disabilities since early childhood did not fully understand those disabilities, were not allowed to fully understand those disabilities by the people around them, who insisted upon treating them as people who could not understand their disabilities. Um, for my own case, it's maybe not extreme, but I there were a lot of moments growing up when I, obviously couldn't see stuff. I wasn't doing my assignments on time, and these sorts of like everyday tasks that involved seeing stuff. Whereas I'm visually disabled, and that was known by all the adults around me. It's hard to say that I had like been given the wrong attitude, but it's definitely true that I was not given the tools to fully understand my eyes. I'm not even sure I fully understand them nowadays, but it was very. I can speak from personal experience to say that it was at least very difficult growing up, not being sure at any given moment whether and to what extent my lackluster performance in academia, such that it was. I mean, we're talking about elementary school. Uh, whether and to what extent my lack of performance was due to vision and due to like genuine being bad at school. I still characterize myself as being broadly bad at school, but it was very sort of pervasive when I was young. When I was, the amongst my friends, always the most behind in the assignments that were due and the most behind in the sort of reading level I was at, these kinds of things. And it's because I had no real way of understanding, and maybe because I was actively denied or passively denied a way of understanding how my eyes affected me, and still do. It's hard to say that that's really anybody's fault for the same reasons that I don't necessarily expect physical and occupational therapists to be perfect teachers of like what disability means in context to children specifically. But it's still the case that like that could be an area of policy that we could adjust, right? Where it could be such that more than the sort of physical and occupational therapy is brought to the fore when it's somebody whose disability is relatively new to that somebody, right? Regardless whether it's a child or someone who's recently sustained what's going to turn out to be a long-term injury or any of those kinds of things, there are probably in all cases going to be barriers to try and break down in terms of cognizance of disability and cognizance of like long-term injury and stuff. Yeah. And I'll also mention, and because it's maybe novel to this conversation, that it's pretty weird that you can age out of a program with no like correlate in terms of need and age, like CCS. By the way, it's peak bureaucracy to forget what the acronym stands for. But
children's services is in the name, so
yes, but why? I think
true.
Here's what I think. Like in general, there are a lot of programs like these out there, and I think they result from legislators trying to get a program into the books, right? Like trying to get credit for doing legislation that amounts to some kind of help for somebody, but being broadly unable to like make that legislation the sort of systemic revolutionary caliber that it would need to be to really solve that problem that it's aimed at. So it aims like at a very small set of problems, and so it constrains itself. And in the process of even of passing the legislation eventually, part of what happens is that you wind up compromising with the other politicians in the room, right? So you, as say you're like a Democratic politician and you want to invent the program that will ultimately turn out to be CCS. You're trying to solve the problem of children having who have disabilities having very limited access to healthcare services, basically, and because of things like income and whatnot, family income, I guess. And you automatically limit that fight for yourself, right? By limiting the scope of it to just children and just like children under certain conditions, children whose parents can like prove it. Obviously, you embed constraints into the system before even negotiation starts, because you want to have a relatively easy fight, because you want to get this legislation through, because you want the credit for it come the next election. Then you obviously have to talk with other politicians in the room about what it's going to be like, and considerations like fiscal responsibility are going to come into it, and you're going to wind up compromising even that already compromised legislation. At every step, the redistributive process is hindered by the legislative process, and I think that's going to happen. That's the kind of thing we can observe with a lot of legislation that comes to the fore, that comes to being, especially with regard to a sort of consistently minority population like the disabled, and especially consistently minority population whose needs are largely technological and financial and stuff, as opposed to it being the case where you can like arrange institutions to work on attitudes and whatnot. You need to change material conditions, and those are especially hard to change legislatively. I've spoken for a long time.
Okay.
What I mean is, like,
you raise a very good point.
Yeah,
and even the broader point is that there's going to be, we can identify problems with disability that are representative of and exemplary maybe of like larger systemic problems that we have, that the incentives around the incentive structure that surrounds politicians and the constraints of the legislative process and all these considerations make it such that you get these policies at the end, and these policies are not as effective as we would like them to be, to the effect that we want them to have.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's
and sorry.
Okay.
I do want to point out before we go any further is that Uh, I do. I did like my therapist a lot that I've worked with, my physical therapist and my occupational therapist. They were absolutely amazing. I doubt they'll be listening to this or watching this, but like my point in saying what I said earlier wasn't to say that therapists are bad or insensitive or whatever, because they were very kind to me and very willing to work with me. But it's the little things that tend to linger. It's the little things that tend to build up and take hold in your mind and start to spread these roots that kind of impact your entire life, right? Um, and they had all of the best intentions when helping me keep my strength and recover my strength when applicable. But the thing is that there is a natural consequence that comes from focusing on that in that sort of
Mm-hmm.
frame, and it's by no fault of their own, and they're not evil for it, but it is something that I think a lot of people who are in the field and a lot of parents who want to put their kids into physical therapy don't think about. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that if we talked about it as a field together with both the disability community and the professionals in the field, I feel like if we talked about it, we could come up with a better way to approach it that puts less pressure on kids about how they feel about their disability as a result of physical therapy.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
physical therapy is still arguably a good thing, and it shouldn't stop just because it's currently, or at least currently when I was a kid, being framed in a way that makes your disability feel like a moral failure, right? Um, and also, second disclaimer, these experiences are over a decade ago, so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the field has changed since then. I don't know um what therapists these days who are new to the field are being taught,
Mm-hmm.
but I do hope that it is evolving in the same direction my own personal um mindset about therapy has evolved, because it's a lot healthier and it makes it a lot easier to stick with.
Yeah,
Sorry, you
sure.
guys can go now.
And that's why I'll shut up after this. Let's that exact kind of consideration is like, or that kind of like caveat to these discussions, exactly why I so prefer, and I think we should all like try to talk about material conditions, things like the entire society's systemic arrangements and public policy that starts at the legislative level, and things like whether and to what extent physical and occupational therapists have to like triage their time between patients, um, and how few of them there are, like how, or rather how few like occupational physical therapists there are, which has to do with things like how much they get paid. There are, the considerations here are very broad, and I try to do that deliberately when I talk about these things, because it's true that in general people are good, like people want good for each other, and so individual actors tend to be acting in good faith. um, that's even true when we talk about real seemingly bad faith issues like Republican politicians and like overbearing police and stuff. They tend to be doing their best, and there are material reasons, or rather mechanistic explanations for why their best just doesn't turn out to be enough, or turns out to be counterproductive. Um, and in cases like this, it's very much true that if physical and occupational therapists have to do things like, I don't know, manage child psychology, in which they may not have any training at all. Like, it's true, for a, for a kid, the weirdest stuff just sticks in your head. I remember this too. Uh, and there's no real way to like predict that, but more training, more time being given to kids, that could have a good effect. And there are, again, broader economic, systemic, material reasons why that's not happening. And so trying to address these seemingly narrow problems in like physical and occupational therapy, it makes sense to address larger problems at the same time, or try to. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on. I'm trying to develop a better
Yeah.
like way of approaching public policy that's like holistic, and I'm not smart enough to do that yet. I'm working on it.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like everything, like these programs are due to politics. So it's just a really good perspective to have. Because with Rihanna and me, we're about like disability, but you're more about like politics and why it matters. That's a good perspective to have. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to add, sorry, no, you go ahead. I've talked a lot.
Okay, so I kind of want to go back to the therapists and stuff and parents and stuff. So like what they kind of want is like they want us to keep our strength for as long as we can, and that's like similar like to me. I can think of like a story like of steroids usage. Like when I was in like a doctor's appointment, they I guess like because I'm getting weaker, I could get steroids for me, so I can keep my strength as much as I can. So what steroids does is essentially just gives you more muscle mass, but at the same time, it makes you weigh more. I have more emotional like outbursts. And like, yeah, it's good that we're gonna keep our strength for a lot longer, but what about like the other effects? And like that's why I decided to like opt out of it because I'm gonna get weaker anyways. And like, for me, like, there's really no point of saving it for as much as I can.
Yeah, and another effect that doesn't really help that whole feeling broken type thing when it comes to physical therapy is being taken out of your daily activities that your peers do together in order to choose a physical therapy. Like if you have to miss class time, if you have to miss lunchtime, if you have to miss parties and hangouts to do your physical therapy, how is that not going to make you feel negatively about the entire thing, both yourself and your disability included, right? You're not going to be motivated to do your physical therapy. You're going to feel bad about yourself. You're going to, feel upset that you are disabled in the first place and therefore have to do this physical therapy and miss out on this precious time you have with, socializing with your peers.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't help. It doesn't help. Like, yes, it's good for your body, but
what about the
your
soul?
mental state of being and the relationships you have with others are just as important as your physical health. They really are. Like,
absolutely.
What's the point if you don't have any friends, right? Especially when you're young.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can that kind of reminds me of like my own preschool days. Sometimes like my therapy sessions last like physical therapy and occupational therapy. I go to at least like twice a week or like 2 different days. And like the best thing for me was to kind of skip lunch. Not really like skip lunch per se, but like go to lunch at an earlier time or just have someone pack me lunch. Like from
skip
the
the
cafeteria.
social part of lunch. Yeah.
Yeah, from the cafeteria, but yeah, and like when I went like to the therapy kind of like place, I guess, like on a bus, I would come back and I would just eat by myself in the office. And like that's the social thing. You're missing on the social things at some parts of the day. So that's definitely I do understand that.
And then they wonder why you hate physical therapy. Like
Can
you're missing all of your social time.
Can I just say that that's like the saddest thing I have pictured in my head, in my hyperbolic mind, obviously, but the idea of like this a wheelchair user who is a child just eating lunch alone in some school office somewhere in California.
Actually,
like,
actually, I wasn't like a wheelchair user yet, so I was eating still by myself.
That was like the point, wasn't it?
I didn't start using a wheelchair till like 7th grade, late 7th grade, I think.
Yeah, I started using
but I used a scooter since like kindergarten, so
even still, man.
Yeah, I started like in 5th or like 6th grade, but like I could still walk during 5th grade, but it's like I should just be in the chair because I can move a lot faster. I could do more things. It's just more helpful in my life. So that's how like I transitioned to a chair.
Yeah, it was a bit rough for me transitioning to the wheelchair because of all that pressure from PT about like keeping up my strength. And the thing is that with my disease, I'm pretty sure it might be similar with you, Brian, but with my disease, it's a kind of, if you don't use it, you lose it type of situation with your muscles. Especially because they're passively degenerating like all
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
time. So using them slows it down. But if you're not using it, it's gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that really kick-started my transition to a wheelchair, I mean, I was already losing strength around that time, but I was transferring to the bathroom by myself one day and I fell and I twisted my ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And because I twisted my ankle, I could not walk until it was healed. And by the time it was healed, I just straight up could not walk. And I felt like I had failed because of that. I was blaming myself for that, which was like the dumbest thing ever. Cause like I saw it coming, right?
Yeah.
I knew I was going to be in a wheelchair in the next few years because, that's just how it goes. And I was overall fine with that, but I was beating myself up over it because I felt like I had failed. I felt like I had let my therapist down and my parents down. They put all this time and energy and money into preserving my muscles, and then I just ruined it, right? But like the point was to just make it last as long as it could, not to make sure I never be in a wheelchair, right? And
yeah.
that pressure really got to me then, and it was rough. I was literally depressed for like the next couple of years after transitioning to a wheelchair because I could not get over the fact that I messed it up for myself. And I put so much pressure on myself from the pressure I was receiving from others to be perfect at this whole physical therapy thing, and that did not work out well for me. And I'm really grateful that I found power soccer when I did, because that definitely saved me. That definitely saved me.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely understand that. Like, it's kind of unexpected, right? And that really
Yeah.
hurts. Yeah, I empathize with you a lot. But yeah, yeah. I kind of wanted to go back to like, honestly, I kind of forgot what I was saying, so I want to cut this all out.
I've been like this
Me
all
too.
day. It's okay. I've been forgetting things I want to say left
Me
and
too. Me
right.
too. Me too. Okay.
Meeting at
Okay. This is
9:30 this
great.
morning.
Okay.
It was bad.
Okay.
Can
What do you want to talk
I?
about? Yeah. Okay.
Something real quick?
We're gonna restart.
I'm sure that it will come up again because I think we have early childhood education like on the docket for meeting topics this semester at some point. I'd have to check to corroborate, so citation needed. But I think it will come up again. But there is a trend in disability of having this experience of having been othered from your peers as a kid because they literally they had to maybe administratively like take you to a separate facility for specialized educational stuff. For me, that was true. I knew a few other kids who were in special ed at my elementary school for whom that was true. We just got taken aside, and it was very difficult to sort of. It would have been very difficult had I been interested in doing so to maintain like relationships with the other students at the time. And that's one of the problems I'm not really sure how to solve, except by bringing like schools into something we can call universal design, but it's not clear that that's like feasible. Well, it's a problem to be worked on, and I approach this through the lens of like incentives and stuff. But speaking of incentives, I hate so much that it was part of the pressure that was on yourself, Rihanna, and I'm sure a lot of people have a similar experience, that it was part of the pressure on you to do to like combat your disability as much as you could, the financial investment that other people had made in that project, right? Because and it makes sense that it was, because we live in a society in which money is everything and everyone is constantly afraid of losing money. But the toll that can take on a person is, I think, routinely underestimated because it's so normal, because it's so ubiquitous. That pressure. I mean, especially in adult life, that pressure is your life.
Yeah, and I know for a fact that the adults in that situation, all those therapists and my parents, did not mean for that pressure to become internalized within me. They didn't mean for it to turn out like that. but that's still what happened. That's still what I came away from all my sessions with, is I need to do better. I need to do better. I need to do better. And then it just kind of snowballed out of control. And I also want to mention, I wasn't necessarily pulled out of class to do physical therapy, but I was pulled out during all the break times, which made it kind of difficult socially, especially because I had to go to a different isolated classroom to, use my standing machine or do my physical exercises. And I also had to have scheduled bathroom breaks because I couldn't just go up and go easily. It was like a 15-minute ordeal. There's a lot of things in a physical health sense that get in the way of your social life, especially in school, because in school, everything's on a time crunch. Everything's scheduled. You can't make flexibility for those types of things within school the way it's set up now. And it's a huge mess. I turned my gym class times into physical therapy times. I turned my lunch time into physical therapy times. I turned tutorial at the start of the day, 20-minute break period sort of things where you're supposed to study, into physical therapy time. So I never actually studied during that time. And it definitely impacted my social life and my ability to interact with my peers in a normal way, especially because I'd have to leave gym class as soon as I got there, or leave school before it even ended, to go to the indoor swimming pool to do my physical therapy swimming, right? And it's a very othering experience. Even if you want to do it, it's still an othering experience, because the people around you at school don't necessarily understand what you're doing or why. And, even if they understood, it doesn't matter, because you're still not able to spend time with them during school,
Yeah. Something else before we kind of end this. I wanted to talk about my wheelchair experience. And for me, I think I was falling a ton. So I was hitting my head on the concrete all the time. So that's another reason why. Well, it wasn't all the time, but it was enough. So that's why I want to be in a wheelchair. I feel safer. And talking about the bathroom breaks, I had a flashback. I totally forgot about me having to use the bathroom at 10:30 or 9:30. I had to schedule it out. So I couldn't use the bathroom whenever I wanted.
Yeah.
And that definitely sucks. And another thing that I wanted to add is that I had to move to a different school. So I moved to Bowling Green Elementary School, and they had a CCS facility built in. So I could just, instead of going on a bus and moving to a different part of town, I could just do it at Bowling Green. And that made things a lot easier. And they had like special ed. I wasn't in special education, but their aides helped me use their bathroom and helped me coordinate times for me to use the restroom. And I wish all schools had this, but they don't. And that's another reason why I switched schools.
And that's why we need to fund our schools and pay our teachers more.
Yeah, I do understand that you can't have it in every school.
Yeah,
it happens.
Not the way it's currently set up. the finance system of public education. Yeah, totally. But why does it have to be set up that way? I think we are coming to a closer, and I want to make sure that there's a little bit of room for further comments. But I just got to say, and I have to say it, I think it's my moral obligation. Sorry, not sorry. Medicare for all. We talk about changing incentive. We talk about making the system more amenable to disability and disabled people in general. A big part of that is Medicare for all. And I want to clarify, because the rhetoric on this is pretty widespread, but mixed, that what I mean by Medicare for all, and what I think a lot of the good faith actors mean by Medicare for all, is not just the expansion of the current articulation of the Medicare program to more people indeed to everybody, because currently it's often supplemented by things by other separate plans that cover things like dental and vision, obvious necessities, things like physical therapy, obvious necessities. I hope it's obvious now, at least in many cases. What I mean by Medicare for All is a much more sort of comprehensive system of medical care administration, sort of free at the point of service, but for things that are important, things that aren't necessary. The policy from my side, like I don't have a full articulation of it to give you, even if we had the time, and we do not. But like, I just want to make that clear that is a solution to a lot of this problem, like a huge portion of it. For one thing, it definitely takes off the like financial pressure on children who have to undergo medical treatment of any kind, including physical and occupational therapy.
Yeah, and that's exactly why you do need Medicare for All. Because no matter how much you try to hide and shield your kids from that pressure that you yourself are facing as the one taking care of them and paying for these treatments, they're gonna find out. You can do your best to hide it, but they're gonna find out. They're gonna figure it out. They're gonna pick up on, your facial expressions and your feelings. They're paying attention even when you think they aren't, and they will figure it out, and they're gonna start blaming themselves. So there isn't a whole lot you can do in that case other than try to comfort them and reassure them that it is worth it, that they're not a burden. But if you didn't have to hide it in the first place, if it wasn't something you had to worry about in the first place, that would make it a million times better. It is indeed only one part of the solution. It's not a one-all fix all type thing, but Medicare for All is something worth investing in.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we were kind of running out of time, like really bad. Sorry. I just wanted, like, before we're going to end it, do you have any like last minute like words? You were talking about Medicare. Anything else? Okay.
Where's the ramp?
Yeah, where's the ramp? Okay.
I've seen some buildings at some of these facilities that don't have wheelchair accessible entrances. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so absolutely. Even that, I'm still questioning where's the ramp.
Yeah. Okay. So this episode, we kind of discussed our personal experiences with physical therapy and occupational therapy. And each of us has some kind of different like experience with it and different perspectives. And I'm really glad that we learned from different perspectives. I'm going to make some announcements. Our next club meeting will be on March 3rd. It's about disability as a form of diversity. But on March 1st, it is the Disability Day of Mourning. Rian, can you explain like a little bit about it? Just like one sentence?
Yeah, sorry. Transitioning from trying to get my cat to jump up to serious topic, but oh, there she is. The Disability Day of Mourning is a day to honor the disabled victims of filicide. Filicide is when you are murdered by a caretaker or parent or relative. It's an unfortunately and disturbingly common occurrence within the disability community, mostly because, ableism, but also it's often excused by media. It's seen as a mercy killing or understandable or, brushed aside. So this is what this day is for. It's to mourn the lives that have been lost and honor them properly as the media has not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. We have a lot of stuff on it. So if you want to check it out, because yeah. But anyways, in next week's episode, we will talk a little bit more in depth about the Disability Day of Mourning. It'll be our Disability Day of Mourning explanation episode. So if that quick explanation wasn't enough, we'll go more in depth. Be on the lookout for Monday at 12 p.m. next week. Again, thank you so much for listening. Please check us out on our socials, blog series on kingssc.com, and podcasts. We also have our podcast and club meeting schedule up on social media right now on Instagram. If you missed anything or the previous episodes or in club meetings, check us out on YouTube where we post our recordings there at Dana at Sac State. Again, thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Where's the ramp?
Where is the ramp?
We're good at podcasting.
You're listening to Through Our Lens with the Disabled and Nondisabled Alliance at Sacramento State, a club, organization, whatever, for disabled students, staff, and their allies to discuss and educate each other about disability-related topics, advocate on behalf of disabled students and the community, and to hang out together and just be a community.
So we want to be more recognizable to Sac State. So please join the conversation by following and messaging us on Instagram at Dana@SexState. It's DANA@SexState.